So our guest today is Takuya Yamazaki, who's joining us, I believe now is the sixth time you're joining us for the Law and Sport podcast. Tak's one of the leading sports lawyers in Japan that many of you will know and probably doesn't need an introduction. But not only is he the founding partner of Field R, which is a specialist sports law firm in Japan, he is also a CAS arbitrator. He's also the chair of FIFPro Asia and a leading academic in all things sports law, but works across the board with football players, baseball players, rugby players, helping set up dispute resolution chambers, which was part of the podcast that we can link to for the last episode. Tak, thanks so much for joining us. Now you've relocated to London.
Yes, yeah.
And luckily that happened, the timing of that happened quite fortunately, really.
Oh yeah, Brexit, COVID-19, a lot of things that happen here in London.
So I'm glad to have you with us. I'm sorry we can't meet in person, of course. When we last spoke, we talked at length around the work that you were doing, in particular around human rights and the Olympic and Paralympic Games. It's fascinating insights into the work that you and the committee members were doing to try to address issues of equality and inclusion at the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games. Obviously, at that time, I think around 9 months ago, no one saw the COVID-19 epidemic coming. As one of the people I personally, come to a lot for advice and insights into how people are feeling, as much as what people know, but how people are feeling in different parts of the world, and particularly in Japan and other parts of Asia. I wondered if you could give an insight into how you saw things unfold as the epidemic sort of hit worldwide, and then the announcement of the postponement of the games, and what that has meant for Japan and Tokyo.
Yeah. So from a broader perspective, of course, I'm really proud of being involved in the Tokyo 2020. But at the same time, I have been feeling kind of a frustration about what's happening surrounding the Olympics. So what I'm saying is that we are in a transition, from kind of a, what I'm always saying is like, from 20th century's business model of Olympics into the 21st business model. So I'm always using this type of kind of expressions to explain the current situation. So looking back at the 1984 LA Olympics, which was led by the huge economy by kind of exclusive sponsorships or something like that. Now we have already transitioned to the new world, where respecting humans or human rights are important to make huge branding or doing social good. It has already become a essential part of a sports business, but it hasn't really happened yet in Japan. So that's kind of a big difference, or that's the reality we have to face. However, it has also highlighted the importance or the reality that the Japanese or the Tokyo Organizing Committee was not really aware of the feelings of foreign people, like Western people, for example. So what this means is that when the media started criticizing the IOC regarding their decision to stick to the original schedule of Tokyo 2020, the Tokyo Organizing Committee couldn't take a leadership in making a decision. They just took it for granted that the Olympic would happen as scheduled, right? So, but if you are really sensitive in understanding the feeling of people or the athletes around the world, the organizing committee would have been able to think about many other options, but that's the reality. Yeah.
So you're saying then that essentially during when all this was in full force and people were in different parts of the world calling for the games to be postponed, you're saying that the organising committee were very focused on delivering the games and therefore didn't really take that into account. And that's just a different mindset of, we've committed to do this, we put a lot of money into doing it, we think we can get it done, this is what we're going to do, as opposed to just having, I guess, being more sensitive to what was going on. That's really interesting. Is that a very sort of typical response? Because we saw at the Rugby World Cup, sorry, the fantastic attitude the Japanese people were dealing with adversity as the storms hit across Japan, and that was something that during and post the World Cup games everyone praised, in terms of just, really just cracking on with it and making sure you were going to deliver a fantastic World Cup. Is that the same? Is that the other side of it, right? It comes with the real positive aspects of it, of being able to deal with these difficult situations, and on the other side, then maybe lacking a little bit in sensitivity.
Absolutely. So, as you can see in the Rugby World Cup last year, I can be proud of level of people, or civilization of people, or the hospitality of Japanese people. But on the other hand, we are such a homogeneous people. So we are not really good at understanding the feeling of others, or the other races, or other type of people. So we have to accept it or admit it. So and also I think another keyword I'd like to focus on is decentralization, that the tendency of a decentralization. So sports business has been led by the centralization, kind of that type of business model. So again, if you look at the 1984 LA Olympics, it was led by the really centralized business model based on exclusivity, or the privilege, special privilege for sponsors or broadcasters or something like that. But the society, or the world has already become more diverse, and we need to understand. So just saying respecting the diversity is very easy thing, but we need to have a real feelings for what's happening around the world.
So you had this viewpoint. Then obviously there were discussions that took place with the IOC, and there was agreement to postpone the games. How did that go down in Japan, and particularly in Tokyo, given that we've all been quite aware of the huge expense hosting Olympic Games costs anyway, in the Paralympic Games, and there was reports of huge sums of monies having to be invested to be found to fund these developments. To delay that already with a very expensive games, that must have been quite difficult, I would imagine, politically, to actually commit to doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also relates the problem of how democratic people are, or how centralized the government is. So if you look at the Japanese government, they are really kind of a successful model in terms of centralization. So good thing or bad thing is that the Japanese people are not really complaining about the situation. So they just follow it. And once the government made a decision, or the Tokyo Organizing Committee made a decision, they just follow. And of course, many of the costs will be borne by taxpayers, including myself. But nobody is really complaining about it. So that's a problem in terms of the real democracy of the Japanese people. So but it might be a good thing, because there is a solidarity or unity. But if I can say, this is a problem, Japanese people have to understand the reality, the reality in the foreign countries. So like if same thing happens in the United States or Western European countries, many of the media or people will say that who's going to bear the cost, or who will take a responsibility or something like that. But we don't have such a feelings right now. So let's look at the 2021 without mentioning the cost associated with it or something like that. So let's get together or something like that. That's the general feeling of Japanese people.
And what do you think then is the opportunity? Because we spoke a couple of weeks ago, hence why we're doing this now. And I was fascinated by your insight into this, in that you think there's a real opportunity here for the organising committee, for everyone involved, to really leverage this in a way that it otherwise wouldn't have. Maybe you could explain that for those who are listening or watching?
Yeah, absolutely. So I personally think that we need to leverage this opportunity to be more inclusive, or to let people working for Tokyo 2020 understand the importance of being inclusive to others. But since due to the fact that the Olympic business model is kind of a centralized business model, it's kind of inconsistent to say that let's be more inclusive or something like that. So that's my frustration over the last 3 or 4 years since I've been involved in the. I got
and you mean
involved
that?
in the project.
Sorry, just to add some color to that. You mean that from every aspect? You mean that from the commercial sponsors perspective, from cooperating with other groups, from an individual athlete perspective, all the way down the chain? You mean that in terms of that mentality of the exclusivity rather than inclusivity, given what you said on the previous podcast, is something that you said in the past has been frustrating. You hope this would change that. In terms of that inclusivity, then, if there was an opportunity here for there to be a more inclusive approach, how do you see that manifest itself?
Of course, before going any further, I want to say that I know the difficulty of this transition. Of course, the prosperity of sports business has been led by that type of exclusive business model. So we can't really say that we should change it today, or or within a week or within a year or something like that. But as you can see, the movement led by FIFA or the movement led by many of the NGOs in relation to the human rights movement. Now we have to understand the sensitivity, or we have to understand the background or the context of this movement. So the core philosophy of this movement is to respect people, or to respect individual people. And I can say that the tendency of this is led by the philosophy of anti-commoditization. So I think the anti-commoditization is kind of a difficult concept to understand, but in 20th century, many of the economy has been was led by the commoditization. And if you look at the European football, there are a lot of commoditizations, including selling players. So there has been huge amount of transfer fee in selling the players, which is kind of not allowed under the modern day or labor laws principles. But it actually happens. So what I want to say here is that so we are in a transition process to a decentralized world. And it's being, this tendency or the transition, the reality of transition has been highlighted by this COVID-19 pandemic. So, every day I receive a lot of calls from players or the players association all over the world. Or we got the letter, or we got the unilateral decision by clubs saying that or your salary will be reduced by 70% from tomorrow or something like that is a really kind of a dehumanized approach, right? So, but many of the sports federations, leagues, clubs, or that type of management people still take it for granted that they can decide anything as they want. So it's really kind of a dehumanized approach. But yeah, so
and it seems
yeah.
I was going
So
to say it's fascinating to watch this play out, because I understand, and we've talked about this on webinars that we've done on the topic. I understand people under huge amounts of pressure at the moment, and therefore they may not make the best decisions. I think that's understandable. However, given that sport plays off this social capital of being a positive influence educationally wise, physically, for society generally, that if people practice what they preach, in the sense of that if you're a football club and you're meant to help out the community, then it's really going to be fascinating to look back in a year's time to see how people conducted themselves, and maybe they'll be judged on that from a legal perspective in terms of how much autonomy they have, but also contractually. And I think there was the head of global sponsorship for Coca-Cola wrote a fantastic update on LinkedIn on this point, making this point, going, it's about relationships. Remember, you want to have these relationships after the COVID-19's long gone, and therefore you should bear that in mind when you're making decisions. And sometimes it's good to talk rather than just send a letter out. So I think, this could be really interesting to see how that plays out. So in terms of then, what would you like to see happen, I guess, is the better way to phrase it. In your ideal world, what would you like to see happening?
So we need to look at the two different type of approaches. One is the bottom-up approach. The other is top-down approach. And again, under the 20th century business model of the Olympics or mega sports event, we can say that the core approach behind this is top-down approach. But we need to make innovations under the by the bottom-up approach. So then, when we talk about, for example, blockchain or that type of democratic, innovative tools, the core concept of blockchain, for example, is bottom-up approach, or the more democratic approach. So people have to be centered to make a decision or to build up something. And in terms of this, the true asset of sports business is engagement, especially fan engagement. So now it's a really good opportunity for us to understand the importance of fan engagement. So fan engagement is a true asset of a sports business. So once we have this type of natural disaster or in this type of pandemic, we tend to think about how can we earn money, or how can we get the support fund or something like that. But of course that is important, but at the same time, we also need to understand or need to think about the very innovative way to monetize our true asset. Our true asset is fund engagement. So so if we think about it in a way like that, then the next question will be, is it absolutely necessary for example, MLB players to play 162 games in a year? Or is it absolutely necessary for Korean player Song Heung-min to play more than 70 matches in a year? It is absolutely, kind of a
No, I agree with you on this.
Crazy, right? So
it does seem like there was a point where, when I say this, people were talking about the valuation of sports rights, and I was saying it seemed to me that there's a very bullish approach anyway, in terms of if you're looking at the market, how the market was feeling. And it seemed to me, whether it was a valuation of OTT platforms, whether it was sports betting rights, whatever it was, it seemed to me that there are very aggressive sort of valuations there. And therefore, as it was driving, that sort of fed in a very, how can I say, commercially aggressive approach, which means you don't have that. You're always pushing it to the edge, and so maybe you don't have the tolerance that you would otherwise have. And I think you're right. I think particularly with that volume of games and how much people can actually consume, maybe people will have some time to actually have a look at this and say, fine, if it is 160 games and that's the way that economically it works out, then fine. But if not, maybe we could revise it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to, just to avoid any misunderstanding. So I want to respect the decision or the tendency led by the sports governing bodies. Of course, playing 162 games is, one of the ways to monetize the asset, but it's not the only way. So, yeah, so we need to be really innovative in monetizing our true assets. So just playing 162 games is not the solution. It's not the only solution. So we need to be really flexible in thinking about the how to monetize in a best possible way. Yeah. So in terms of this, I think I gave an example of blockchain, but it's just an example. So that type of innovative technology can be a really great tool to think about how we can monetize through assets which we have right now. So we haven't really been aware of our true assets. Just playing the game. We took it for granted that playing many more games would create the most value and would create it would be the best possible way to monetize the asset. But it's not the only way actually. So now I'm kind of really positive in thinking about to be more innovative in thinking about the best possible way to monetize our own assets.
And so within that, I know that I keep going back to it because we had such a great call when we just caught up last week about this. So I'm just trying to, for those that obviously no one else heard the conversation, so just put it into perspective. When you're saying about this, understanding the true asset is engagement. You were saying this again when it ties into where does the value of sport come back to. It comes back to the so I can hear my screaming 1-year-old in the background. This is the COVID-19 office. So apologies if you're picking that up. I'm not sure if you are picking that up in the background. The relationship between the engagement, but is also that ties into the education, the social impact, social capital, etc. And so at the moment, the big drivers has been this commercial gain, because it's such a competitive environment and looking to invest. Whereas actually, if you take a slightly different lens and say, how actually we've got these assets. So in the UK in particular, the football clubs and their community trusts have been doing fantastic work. Some of them have been doing some fantastic work, like many other sports organisations around the world. I said this to you last week, so Stephen Curry did a fantastic, took over the NBA YouTube channel, Instagram, etc., and had one of the leading experts in the US talk about the COVID-19, what it meant, why people should stay indoors, etc., which again was a fantastic example of leveraging that fan engagement point. I know there's been ones in the UK, I'm just using that as one example. There's been others around the world, but I thought that was a great example. So when you talk about it in that term, you're not just talking about it as a usual fan engagement, a transactional. You're talking about it more in a true, meaningful relationship way.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's my point. And I think it was really difficult for us to think about the true asset or the meaningful way of engagement. But because we were so busy in playing many games or just doing the daily routines or a lot of stuff. But now it's a really good time. It's a really great opportunity to think about the most sustainable way to keep this industry. So
what does that mean? What does that mean then for Tokyo, given that there's probably going to be you would think a huge financial deficit there, potentially? How do you see how would you see that? Would you see there being more sort of partnerships between the athletes? I know there was relaxation of rule in various parts of the world, and obviously the IOC relaxed Rule 40. Do you see there being some of the commercial sponsors who are tier 1, tier 2, are they? Do you think they will take a more? Do you think it's going to take this more collaborative approach to try to reap back some of the losses that are there?
Yeah, I cannot be really optimistic about it. Based on my experience of working for Tokyo 2020 organizing committee as well as the IOC. But we need to make it happen. That's my opinion. So I'm always saying that the ambush marketing is one of the best ways to, think about the better fan engagement, right? So of course, in sports industry, ambush marketing is a bad thing, and of course I agree with. But ambush marketing has been really kind of innovative way to make a good way of fan engagement. So I, as a sports law specialist, have been saying that let's continue the good doing good ambush marketing, because it is absolutely beneficial to sports industry as a whole. So and also if you look at the 20, yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify that, in the sense that obviously some people would, when we talk about ambush marketing, it's a broad concept and term, and sometimes people refer to ambush marketing and really what they're talking about is someone just being very innovative without infringing any intellectual property rights, but just thinking
Absolutely.
about how to raise awareness. Just because I know some people would listen to that and think, well, that doesn't, for someone in the sports sector, they would think that you'd probably be anti-ambush marketing. But I think that's such a broad term. Sometimes it's unhelpful. Certainly, it's one of the main terms we use, but it's unhelpful. That's really interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would like to even encourage ambushers to make more innovative projects. So just given an example, one of the official sponsors of Tokyo 2020 said to me that we have absolutely no plan to activate the sponsorship. And it's absolutely true for many of the official sponsors of Tokyo 2020. They were just asked to become sponsors by someone,
right.
I mean the government, or the established people or whatever. But they don't know what to do. They don't know how to activate their sponsorship, or they don't know how they can benefit from the sponsorship. So that's the reality. So ambushers are generally more innovative or creative in thinking about the activation of sports.
Because you think at this moment in time, I know that UK sport are doing some stuff, many others are. And I saw some really cool clip on the Olympic channel on my YouTube feed, was when the gymnast doing an indoor backflip, and I was worried he was going to hit his head on the ceiling, but he took his jumper off while doing it. It's very impressive. But if the objective of the sponsors is not only to raise brand awareness, but to create more engagement and affinity towards their brands anyway, you think that a time of crisis is the ideal opportunity to do that, to do something where, in my view, they should be sitting there, and that's all they should be thinking about this moment in time, is like, how can we add value to other people? And that would be the thing. Absolutely. Right? If they could say, how could we use this opportunity to get the audience, to show people that we actually do care? And if they do that, by the time the games comes around, there'll be, in theory, you see, if their objective was to, I don't know, penetrate certain markets, increase their market share, etc., that'd probably be more likely to happen if they actually do that. So I'm surprised and disappointed to hear that, and I hope that or maybe they're doing things in other ways. Maybe they're just not using the Olympics as a mechanism to do it, if you see what I mean, at the moment, because there's other very pressing issues that they're probably addressing.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that the centralization versus decentralization is kind of a keyword. And of course, I know the frustration of official sponsors over Tokyo 2020, against the possible ambush marketing. But if they found ambush marketing, they should think like it's a really good way to look at themselves, look at their own branding strategy, whether it is working or not. And then if they found ambush marketing, certain ambush marketing are really better than themselves, then they can improve themselves, or like oh, this is really interesting, but we will do more interesting things than yours. That's the best way to improve the quality of a sponsorship or mega sports event.
And what's happening in terms of, in other parts of the world, there's a lot of conversations around force majeure clauses and frustration and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Respecting people's rights. Obviously, the FIFA have made their published their guidelines in which they're encouraging people to enter dialogues in terms of extending seasons and contracts. Very sort of almost a mediation type approach, really, to deal with the situation. From a Japanese perspective, what's the approach in terms of delayed seasons, started extensions of seasons? What's the approach with the athletes, with their sponsors and agents currently? Is it just in a state of flux like everyone else?
Yeah. We have 4 professional players associations: so baseball, football, rugby, and basketball. And of course, some of the management people have already started talking about the possible salary reduction or something like that. But the discussion has just been started, so not we haven't reached the conclusion. But at the same time, as I said, the fan engagement under these circumstances is very important. So that is why Japanese Baseball Players Association has started the charitable activities to support, medical or hospital, those who are engaging with the helping people, the patients of COVID-19. So that type of variable activities has to be central, rather than just focusing on the how to share the burden or how to share the damage in the industry. Of course, we need to talk about it. I fully understand we need to talk about it, but at the same time, we also need to think about how we can add value to the societies. So, and that will show that the sports industry has a value in the society. And once we succeed in proving the fact that this is a really valuable asset in our society, then the money will follow. So we need to do that type of thing first, rather than So I got kind of fed up with a lot of the discussions about the
I think most people do nowadays.
FIFA or something like that. But we should make it. Of course, it's not really easy, but we should think about what we can do under this environment. So that's the most enjoyable way to live our life.
Well, we talked about this again last week when from a law and sport perspective, when we obviously went on lockdown, we went a bit earlier than was our government advised. And the first week was really wondering what the hell we were doing, because you just felt so insignificant, given that all these people on the front line, whether they're in the workers in shops or taxi drivers, bus drivers, etc., all the public servants, basically, the police, fire brigade, obviously in our case the NHS, and you kind of felt that this is a bit ridiculous. And then we stopped and thought about it and said, right, well, how can we help? That's when we started to do more COVID-19 focused stuff to try to do what we do well, provide some clarity for people and some direction. And that then did make us feel like we were actually contributing something useful, and that actually this is where we can be beneficial to people, because hopefully it can mean more people will have jobs at the end of it. People come up to the best decision. The sports sector will do our little bit to help. So I agree with that fundamentally.
And also, Sean, and this is a really important point. So no players want to be really egoistic in keeping the salary as it is. So we or most of the players I would say all of the players want to support the clubs or the management. So we are the partners, and we need to help each other under this challenging circumstances. I think that kind of a message should be shared with many people. So I think the trust is very important, and the problems which tend to happen under this environment is a unilateral decision made by the management without informing or without disclosing any financial figures or actual damages which they suffer from this pandemic. They just got frustrated and they are making really the decision that oh, your salary will be reduced or something like that. But we as stakeholders have to be really involved in the decision-making process. And once we are involved in the decision-making process, they will, or the players will understand absolutely. And I think that type of approach is absolutely needed, and that is why FIFA has been encouraging the collective bargaining at the national level.
And I think you're right. And I'll be, like I said again, I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens at the end of all of this with when we look at governance, good standard governance, transparency, decision-making processes, etc., within sports organisations, where there's been a lot of distraction around rather trivial things at times.
Right.
That everyone gets caught into, as people negotiate on various points, but the fundamental points, have often been overlooked. And I think it's going to be really, really interesting, because I think we'll see almost night and day between those who had things running properly, let's say, and those things that are either distracted on doing other things or were very, let's say, I don't say it's old-fashioned, but let's say maybe outdated, or hadn't been kept up to speed, or it got ahead of them. And I'm very sympathetic to that, because I know how busy everyone is. I know that these things, particularly in sport, with all the passion and all the commentary, it can be difficult to stay on top of things. But at the same time, your job as a leader or as an executive is to focus down and narrow down. There's been a lot of talk about this, so it's going to be really, really interesting to see. But I also think there'll be some how sport is financed. I think I'll be fascinated to see how that pans out. What assets are sold off, what are not, which are remain, etc. Well, Tak, thanks so much for your time. Before we go, I always give you the final word on this. Is there any sort of final words that you'd like to add, or anything, any other observations at this moment in time?
Yeah, so the keyword is again the decentralization versus centralization. And many people or many management people in sports industry are still sticking to the centralized business model, but we are living the new normal or new world where decentralization or more democratic way of thinking is very, very important. So in terms of this, I'm really optimistic or positive in thinking about the new way of monetizing our assets, or a new way of engaging with people or fans of sport.
Brilliant. I'm hopeful too. It's going to be really interesting to see what's happened. Well, stay safe, stay well. Thanks for taking the time out to speak. No doubt we'll speak in a few weeks' time. I'm pretty confident of that on one thing or another, to stay updated, because it can be such a fast-changing environment nowadays. But thanks so much for taking the time out to tune in. Thanks everyone for listening and watching.
Thank you, Sean.